1 month before my wedding to Victor, he knelt down and begged me for one thing. Not a proposal, he begged me to give the bride's place to his first love. His eyes were red as he said, "My mother has Alzheimer's, she only recognizes her as her daughter-in-law. It's just putting on a play, fulfilling my mother's dream." I looked at him and laughed. He wanted to act? He wanted to fulfill a dream? Good. I personally built the grandest stage for him, and not only invited his first love. I even brought back his biological father, and his father's mistress, all dressed up, attending and sitting in the seat that should have belonged to the mother-in-law. There was 1 month left until the wedding. After pestering him repeatedly and losing my temper, I issued one final warning, "Victor, if you don't want to get married, just say so. There's no need to keep dragging your feet when we're choosing the dresses." Only then did Victor finally come with me to the bridal shop to pick our outfits. He kept explaining, "Baby, the company has had so much going on lately. Isn't it because I took time off for the wedding that I'm so busy?" In the bridal shop, the Vera Wang gown I had painstakingly selected, after 2 months of reservations, sparkled under the lights, but he didn't even lift an eyelid. He just kept his head down, fiddling with his phone, his fingers dancing across the screen. Seeing that I was still staring at him, he immediately put his phone away and smiled as he explained, "There's just a lot going on at the company, sorry baby." Also a corporate slave, I couldn't say I didn't understand, but I frowned and nodded. From the moment we walked in, through the measurements, to the salesperson enthusiastically explaining the design inspiration, his finger never left that screen. The phone's notification chimes and the buzzing of incoming messages were like a swarm of annoying insects hovering over the bridal shop. "Victor," I said, tamping down my anger as I picked up a tulle dress studded with tiny crystals, "how about this one?" He finally lifted his head from the screen, his gaze sweeping over the dress with a blank air, as if scanning an unimportant piece of merchandise, and he hastily nodded, "Looks good, baby, you look good in anything." Before his words finished, his eyes were already glued back to his phone, his fingers flying across it, a faint curve tugging unconsciously at the corner of his mouth. A spark of anger flared up inside me, shooting skyward. Just as I was about to erupt, he seemed to sense my low pressure, abruptly snapped his phone shut, stepped forward to fold his arms around my waist, and in a deliberately softened voice said, "My bad, I've been so busy lately. Come on, baby, let your husband give you his full attention." His finger idly pointed to a lavish, court-style gown. "Why don't you try this one? I think it would suit you." I looked at the dress that was clearly not my style, kept a cold face, told the sales assistant which gown I wanted to try on, and then wordlessly walked into the fitting room. Leaning against the cold mirrored wall, I took a deep breath and tried hard to convince myself not to care about these little things. A marriage can only last on mutual understanding. Outside, I could vaguely hear his lowered voice on the phone, intermittent and indistinct. The salesgirl beside me, seeing my displeased expression, hurried to comfort me. "Miss Evelyn, your husband is so busy but he still came to help you try on wedding dresses. That's really something. We've seen so many people whose husbands don't come at all. They say they want to surprise you, but who doesn't want their husband by their side?" The sales assistant's consolation, not the best, but better than some, soothed my frayed nerves. Maybe, after all, I really wasn't being understanding enough of Victor. With the assistant's help I stepped into that wedding dress. The ivory satin clung like a second skin to every curve, and the enormous train unfurled behind me, elegant and pure. I lifted the skirt and walked out slowly. The moment the dressing room curtain drew back, the warm lights in the shop seemed to converge on me. Victor looked up at the sound, and in that instant I caught, crystal clear, the unabashed awe that flashed in his eyes. That light was so real it instantly smoothed the restless turmoil in my heart. I twirled happily in front of the full-length mirror, watching myself in a wedding dress. Joy, shyness, and the anticipation of becoming someone's wife wove me into a pink bubble. I wished I could fast forward straight to the ceremony. "Let's go with this one. Book it for me." I signaled to the sales assistant and turned to head to the fitting room to try on the next gown. The instant I pivoted, Victor's brows knitted tightly. He stepped forward in a few strides and grabbed my wrist, his grip so strong it felt like it might crush my bones. "Evelyn, come with me for a moment." His voice was low and hoarse, unquestionable as he pulled me into a corner. Before I could steady myself, the next instant he made a motion that almost stopped my blood cold. He let go of my hand, then, straight and sudden, with no warning, he dropped to his knees in front of me. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry, baby." He tilted his head back, his face full of pain and struggle. "There's something I've been holding in for too long. If I don't say it now, I'll go mad." A chill shot from the soles of my feet and ran through my whole body. What are you doing? Get up." I didn't understand, my voice trembling as I reached out to lift him. He stubbornly stayed on his knees, grabbing my veil-covered arm, his tone pleading. Could the wedding, have Sunny be the bride? The air around us seemed to freeze. I wondered if my ears were playing tricks on me. Victor had mentioned this Sunny to me, his first love. They'd been together for a long time, but in the end they broke up. What? He began to explain incoherently, like someone reciting a script he'd rehearsed 1,000 times. "Evelyn, my mom, you know, her dementia is getting worse. She only recognizes Sunny now, she only accepts Sunny as her daughter-in-law. Her greatest wish is to see me marry Sunny. She doesn't have much time left, I'm begging you, I just want to fulfill her last dream." He pleaded with me urgently, his tone almost a supplication. "It's just the ceremony. Just for show. At the wedding the bride's name will be yours, the bride price and dowry are yours, the people sitting below will be your relatives, it's just that the one standing beside me in a wedding dress would temporarily be Sunny, okay? The moment the ceremony ends I'll send my mother to the best nursing home. It's us who will go register as husband and wife. I love you, I only love you, please, just tolerate this once, for me, for my mom." I stood there in a carefully chosen wedding gown, a glossy, dazzling clown, watching my fiancé kneel before me in the prelude to our wedding, begging me to let my own wedding, my groom, my everything, be temporarily handed over to another woman. "So this is why you've been putting off coming with me to pick out the wedding dress?" I said slowly, like a teacher asking a student a question I already knew the answer to. The world was terrifyingly silent, leaving only his heavy breathing and the soft sound of my heart breaking piece by piece. After we got home, I locked myself in my room for 3 days. I didn't cry, didn't make a scene. My tears had been completely dried up by that absurd request back at the bridal shop. In my head a film kept playing, replaying over and over the whole story of how Victor and I met. He and I were introduced by one of my dad's old buddies of decades. Uncle Walter, my dad's friend and also the boss at Victor's company. At a gathering once, Uncle Walter patted his chest and assured my dad, "Richard, Victor at my company is a 1 in a million find. Capable, down-to-earth, and most importantly responsible and filial. He has only one sick mother at home and shoulders it alone without a single complaint. He put himself through grad school. Entrust your precious daughter to him. I, Walter, will stake my honor on it, there's absolutely no problem." Looking back now, the word filial really was no exaggeration at all. The first time we met, Victor was flawless. He listened with a smile as Uncle Walter made the introductions, and the way he looked at me carried just the right mix of admiration and being pleasantly overwhelmed. He spoke with poise, had a clear plan for the future, and would occasionally slip in a line about his mother's illness and his arrangements for her care, crafting the image of someone who had grown up through hardship yet remained sunny and resilient. At the time I even thought that if he could treat his mother that way, he would surely treat my parents the same. How foolish I was, truly. I had forgotten that for a man who regards filial piety as a lifelong vocation, anything in his life can be sacrificed in the name of duty. Including the marriage, including himself. On the 4th morning I finally left my room. As I came downstairs, my face was frighteningly calm. My father was reading the paper, my mother arranging flowers. I walked over, sat opposite them, and in a flat tone recounted, word for word, the farce at the bridal shop. The air went dead silent. The newspaper in my father's hands began to tremble slightly at the edges, then with a ripping sound he clenched it hard and crushed it into a ball. His face was ashen, a vein at his temple pulsing visibly. Bastard! He slammed the table so hard the solid wood gave a dull, thunderous sound. The teacups on it jumped from the shock. What kind of thing is his Victor? How dare he treat my daughter like this? Walter, what the hell did he introduce to us? I'll call him right now. How could he introduce such a beast to my precious daughter? My mother's reaction was even more extreme. Tears welled up in an instant. She rushed over and grabbed me, her voice trembling. My Evelyn, my poor Evelyn, what kind of sin is this? How dare he do this to you? This marriage is off. Break it off immediately. Your father and I will go get justice for you right now. Watching my parents lose control from the intensity of their anger and heartbreak, my heart finally found warmth again. Being an orphan with only a widowed mother was the thing my parents liked most about Victor. He was practically marrying into our family. Everything was understood without being said. My parents only asked for a token amount for the bride price. The dowry was dozens of times the bride price Victor had prepared. Yet he actually had the nerve to make such an outrageous demand. Any parent would have found it impossible to accept. Dad, Mom, I said, my voice low but unnervingly calm, don't look for Uncle Walter. My parents looked at me at the same time, their faces full of disbelief and ache. Why? Do you still want to? My mother grabbed my hand anxiously. No, I don't intend to forgive him, and there's no way I'm going to marry him. I took a deep breath, let my gaze sweep over my parents, and spoke clearly, word by word. He toyed with me like that, treated our whole family like puppets. If we just broke up and let him walk away unscathed, I couldn't swallow that. My father's eyes suddenly sharpened, he stared at me intently. So what do you want to do? I will get my revenge. Marriage is not child's play. He must pay. He's not the one who cares most about his future, his filial piety, his reputation. I will make him watch these things, one by one, be shattered before his eyes. I looked at my parents, pleading, so, Mom, Dad, don't alert him. Let me handle it. Don't worry, I won't have any feelings for him anymore. I will make him know that using me, deceiving our Lynn family, was the most foolish decision he has ever made in his life. My mother was about to speak, but my father raised his hand to stop her. There was a wordless understanding between father and daughter born of blood, a single look exchanged and each immediately grasped what the other was thinking. Good. My father had only one word, his tone resolute in expressing his stance. Whatever you need the family to do, tell us at any time. Remember, the Lynn family will always be your backing. I nodded, and an inexplicable expectation began to swell inside me. A week passed, and Victor didn't call or message, nothing. It was as if his kneeling that day in the bridal shop had been a hallucination of mine. He was waiting. Waiting for me to break, waiting for me to concede, waiting for me to take the initiative and bless his earth-shattering filial devotion. Maybe in his eyes I really was completely trapped by his marrying into my family hold. Fine, then I'll be the one to make the move. I sent him a message, Victor, let's talk. He replied quickly, as if he'd been sitting at his computer waiting for my message. In the corner of the cafe he plopped down beside me, his eyes betraying a pride that was about to spill over. When I stayed silent, he wasn't offended, he took it as me being in a mood. I know you're upset, he struck first, his tone heavy, but baby, think about it, that's my mom. The woman who gave birth to me and raised me. This is all she has left to cling to. As her only son, what am I supposed to do? Just stand by and watch her live with regret. He skillfully raised the banner of filial piety. I kept my head down, mechanically stirring my coffee with a spoon, saying nothing, cultivating the appearance of inner conflict. He saw I didn't answer and shifted his tone toward me. I've always thought you were reasonable, kind, and magnanimous. I thought you could understand me, support me. Could our feelings really be outweighed by a mere formal wedding? Baby, do you really love me, or do you only love the idea of being the bride? His manipulative lines made me smile, PUA tactics arriving belatedly but still present. He was changing the subject, twisting the core of the problem from his absurd demand into an accusation that I was fixated on status and didn't love him enough, wasn't kind enough. I lifted my head at the right moment, my eyes slightly red, my voice trembling with a hint of disbelief. How can you say that? I just can't accept that the person standing next to you isn't me. His tone softened, laced with temptation as he continued to cajole me. It's just for show, to reassure my mom. Once she's at ease, I'll put her in a care home, and our life will get back on track. Then we'll go to the Maldives for our honeymoon, just the two of us, how about that? He reached out to take my hand, I instinctively pulled back. Realizing that was wrong, I immediately grabbed the hand he'd withdrawn. Unless, I said as if I'd finally made up my mind, biting my lip and casting out the bait, unless you let me see Sunny. I want to hear from her myself that she's only helping out and nothing more. Victor's expression changed in an instant, his body visibly tensed, and his instinct to protect his own was laid bare. Why would you want to see her? Sunny is so innocent and timid, don't go and scare her. If you've got an issue, take it out on me. A cold laugh rose in my chest, but my face showed hurt and grievance. In your mind, am I really that malicious, someone who would go and hurt others? Victor, I just want some peace of mind. Is that too much to ask? Or is it that in your eyes I don't even deserve to see her? I stood up, making as if to leave. If you won't even give me that little bit of trust, then there's nothing left for us to discuss. Don't. He hurriedly stood and grabbed me. Let me. I'll arrange it. But you have to promise me, after you meet her, you won't make things hard for her. I said nothing, my gaze fixed unblinkingly on the direction of the cafe door. She was doing me a favor, I owe her. Baby, don't misunderstand, I'm just afraid. I whipped my head around, shook off his hand, and demanded sharply, afraid of what? Afraid I'll hurt your first love, or afraid of what? Victor's face drained of color, he stammered, no, baby. You know, my mom. I raised my hand and cut off the sentence he had been unable to finish for ages. Don't use your mom as an excuse. You've never once tried to see things from my perspective, from my parents' perspective, and consider how we feel. To make him completely let down his guard, I played my final trump card. My parents. I've already told you. But you still have to come back with me and explain it to them in person. Victor's eyes lit up instantly, as if he had seen the dawn of victory. He hurriedly agreed, his excitement barely contained on his face. That night, I took him home. Even from behind the front gate, I could feel the barely suppressed anger radiating from my parents, like a volcano about to erupt. I slipped him a look, they drew a long breath and forced their emotions down, faces stiff. Victor was probably too proud of his advantage as the lonely son and of the put-upon posture of marrying in to notice the strange atmosphere at all. He sat on the sofa, back straight, and began again his histrionic performance. Uncle, Aunt, he said in a heavy tone, I know this request is outrageous, and I'm terribly sorry to Evelyn. But I really have no choice, my mother, she only recognizes Sunny. The doctors say it's her last wish, if we don't fulfill it, her condition could deteriorate rapidly. He helped himself to a tissue from the tea table and dabbed at the phantom tears in the corners of his eyes. Sunny didn't mean anything by it. I was the one who asked her, she's soft-hearted, she took pity on me and agreed to help. She didn't want anything, really, it was purely out of kindness. He shifted his tone, as if struck by a brilliant idea, then spoke in a manner that suggested he was doing a favor. Of course, if Mom and Dad feel bad about it, then later we can symbolically give her a red envelope, treat it as a performance fee? After all, the girl did sacrifice her reputation to help with this. He suddenly changed his tune, speaking as if he had already succeeded in becoming the Lin family's live-in son-in-law, instructing my parents on what to do. The moment performance fee came up, I clearly saw my father's hand on his knee clench into a fist, the knuckles whitening. My mother's breathing suddenly intensified, her chest heaving violently, on the verge of slapping the table and storming out. Victor seemed to realize he'd overstepped, sulking as he fell silent and quickly tried to backtrack. Of course, this is just a little immature thought of mine. It mainly depends on what your parents and Evelyn want. After the wedding is over and my mother's sent to the nursing home, I'll essentially be formally marrying into the Lynn family. I'll definitely be filial to you too and make it up to Evelyn. The way he pretended to be magnanimous and self-sacrificing, even though he'd schemed down to his bones, made my stomach turn. That's enough, Victor. We're not even married yet, it's not appropriate to change how you address me now. Seeing that if he continued my parents would really lose control and throw him out on the spot, I spoke again, my voice pleading, Dad, Mom, please, don't make things difficult for him. He's had a hard time too. I looked at Victor, my expression complicated. All right, I agree. In that moment, the expression that bloomed on Victor's face was an unabashed, relieved ecstasy. He probably really believed that, with his intelligence and deep affection, he had successfully appeased me, handled my parents, and was about to fulfill his perfect dream of being both loyal and filial. I finally met the Sunny Victor had mentioned. She was a frail woman who appeared very shy and introverted. Tasting the menu, trying on wedding dresses, taking welcome photos, finalizing the wedding schedule, for all those stages, the three of us were present. But standing beside Victor, smiling and offering opinions in the manner of the bride, it was Sunny who assumed that role. I was merely an accompaniment. I watched them. In the high-end bridal boutique, Sunny wore the main gown Victor had carefully chosen. She spun before the mirror while Victor stood behind her, his gaze so tender you could almost see it weep, his hand naturally resting around her waist. The sales staff all sensed something odd, but seeing how unhesitatingly Victor swiped his card, they could only suppress the pity in their eyes, calling Sunny Miss, you're so beautiful at every turn, never once saying bride. The tasting day was even more absurd. She held the menu and asked Victor in a coquettish voice, Victor, is this lobster good? Will Auntie like it? Victor replied with an indulgent air, just order whatever you want. Moms and your preferences are what matter most. I sat opposite them, watching the two with their heads close together, whispering, occasionally exchanging smiles, that tacit understanding and sweetness prickling my eyes. I felt like a wedding planner, helping this couple in front of me complete the tasks for their wedding. I restrained the tide of emotions within me, played along with their performance, and even managed to pull on a measured, gentle smile when they asked my opinion, as long as you like it. Everything was harmonious, until we began drafting the guest list. I organized the list of my fake relatives and handed it over, then asked Victor as if casually, do you want me to contact your father's side? Marriage is a big deal, he should at least be informed. Victor's expression darkened in an instant, like a small beast that had been abandoned. He clenched his fist violently, his tone hard and edged with anger. Why would you bring him up? He's been dead for a long time. I don't have a father. I stepped forward and gently took his arm, soothingly urging, don't be like that, Victor. After all, he's your biological father. For something as important as a wedding, if he could be there, Auntie would certainly be happier to see it, maybe it would even help with her condition? My words hit exactly the rotten spot in Victor's filial logic. He choked on them, the muscles in his face twitched repeatedly. Filial piety is the foundation of all virtues. Victor, you wouldn't want Auntie to be left with regrets, would you? Sunny, standing beside us, cast a questioning look at just the right moment. As if afraid Sunny would see through him, Victor hemmed and hawed for a long time. In the end, extremely reluctantly, he fished a crumpled slip of paper out of a compartment in his wallet. On it was a fuzzy address and a phone number that had long been disconnected. He threw it in front of me, impatient and certain I couldn't do it yet afraid I might. There. That's it. Haven't contacted them in years, who knows where that person is now. Don't waste your effort. I took the slip, the ink already blurred, my fingertips brushing its frayed edge, and smiled faintly. He thought this would stump me and make me give up? Ridiculous. I pulled in every favor I could. A private detective, my father's network, following the faint clues on the note, we searched through the sea of people with great difficulty. The process was far from smooth, the address was fake, the phone number led nowhere, and Victor's father seemed to have deliberately erased all traces. But in the end, we found him, and heard that life had been very hard. 3 days before the wedding, all preparations were complete. Victor and Sunny were utterly swept up in the joy of a dream about to come true, and toward me, the magnanimous fiancé, they finally let go of the last shred of suspicion. Watching those two so inseparable and intimate, I dialed Victor's father's number. The line clicked through, and a somewhat world-weary, wary male voice answered, "Who is this?" I began slowly, polite but maintaining my boundaries, "Is this Mr. James?" "Hello, I'm Victor's fiancé. We'd like to invite you and your wife to our wedding in 3 days. I've already booked the plane tickets and the hotel for you. Your son is remarkable, he finished his master's and earns a good salary. Isn't it time you enjoyed the blessings of children and grandchildren?" On the wedding day, the hotel's banquet hall shimmered with lights and throngs of guests gathered. I wore a tasteful casual outfit and took in the wedding scene Victor had spared no expense to create. Victor's colleague standing nearby looked at the costly floral display and said, "I've heard Victor put his entire fortune into this wedding, just to give the bride a wedding she'll never forget. Isn't that something to envy?" Victor wore a crisp suit, his hair combed with meticulous care, standing in the hotel lobby to greet guests. At the sight of my arrival, a faint, scarcely noticeable flicker of guilt crossed his eyes, gone in an instant. He stepped in front of me and said, flauntingly, "Evelyn, why don't you be my bridesmaid? Just stand behind Sunny. See, that way when we're making our vows up on stage, the one I'm really looking at will actually be you. To me, the person I promised my life to has always been you." He was still using his repertoire of manipulative lines to PUA me, trying to weave a false dream for me, to make me willingly sink into this wedding of ours, even asking me to hand him the ring myself. I stared into his eyes, trying to see whether there was anything in them that belonged to human emotion. Victor was extremely embarrassed, his eyes darting around. I curled my lips into an exceedingly solicitous smile and turned my gaze toward Victor's mother, who sat not far away in a wheelchair. "No," my voice was soft but firm. "Auntie can't be left alone. Today is a very important day for her, I have to stay with her. After all, in today's play, she is the most important audience, isn't she?" I deliberately emphasized the words play and audience, but unfortunately Victor, intoxicated with joy, couldn't detect the irony at all. He was deeply moved, stepped forward and grasped my hand tightly, then released it the next second, glancing left and right as if afraid someone might see. "Evelyn, you're so understanding. I'm sorry for making you endure this today. Once my mother is settled, I will make it up to you 1,000-fold." He offered a few more weightless, sugary promises, then couldn't wait any longer, turning on his heel, abandoning his mother and me, to go greet his bride as she entered. The MC's enthusiastic voice carried through the speakers across the hall, lights focused on the tightly closed doors of the banquet room, and everyone craned their necks, waiting for the bride Sunny to make her entrance. Victor stood at the end of the red carpet, straightening his bow tie, his face showing an uncontrollable, almost trembling anticipation. I pushed the wheelchair, bent close to Victor's mother and said clearly and calmly, "Auntie, the real show is just beginning. It's too noisy here, I'll take you to a better seat, to watch your son's performance." After speaking, I didn't glance back at the man lost in his dream on the dais. I pushed the wheelchair, unhurried, step by step, against the gaze of everyone's expectations, and walked straight out of the noisy banquet hall. Behind me was the surprise I had prepared for Victor's wedding. The wedding proceeded in an orderly fashion, every part carefully designed by me. Before the formal kowtow and the change of name, the bride and groom read handwritten letters to each other, bearing their hearts. The master of ceremonies, with professional poise, diligently moved the program along, everything was perfect. At last, the moment I had been most looking forward to arrived, the tea ceremony for the name change and the parents' formal thanks. The MC raised his voice, filling the room with festivity and working to stir the audience. "Next, please give a warm round of applause to invite the parents of the bride and groom to the stage. Receive the couple's kowtowing and gratitude." The spotlight swung to the reserved seats beside the head table, the places where the closest relatives from both sides were supposed to sit. The eyes of everyone present, including Victor and Sunny's, were smiling and expectant, all turned in that direction. Then, in the next instant, the smug grin on Victor's face froze. The entire banquet hall fell into an eerie silence. Whispered murmurs spread like a rising tide. What's going on? Weren't those supposed to be the parents from both sides? I don't know, why are there only two people sitting over there? Who's that man? I've never seen him before. The woman isn't Mrs. Grace either. Don't you guys know? Sunny was a classmate of ours in high school, she's an orphan. Under the spotlight, a man and a woman unknown to anyone were waiting to drink tea. The man was roughly in his 50s, wearing a suit that was obviously ill-fitting and even somewhat outdated. His features faintly resembled Victor's, but looked older and more weathered. The woman beside him wore an overly bright rose-red suit that clashed with the tone of the venue. She had the smile of a victor, her eyes darting repeatedly toward the stage, the corners of her mouth lifted in a wide arc. Victor stared fixedly at that middle-aged man, the color drained from his face bit by bit, his mind went blank. A tearing pain burst from the spot over his chest. For a moment he seemed to revert to that frail child running after a car on a rainy night. The ruthless kick the man delivered before he left, the one meant to sever him, struck his heart with the same brutal precision years later. His face went ashen, white as paper. He staggered backward uncontrollably and knocked over the decorative champagne tower behind him. The grating crash of shattering glass seemed not to register. He stared fixedly at the ill-fitting suit the other man wore, his lips trembling, unable to form a sound. It's you, he finally managed to force out in a fractured whisper from between his teeth. The MC froze too, clutching the microphone and awkwardly trying to recover. It seems our bride and groom are a bit emotional, let's give them another round of applause. Victor couldn't hear a word the MC was saying. Sunny beside him tugged his arm, but he didn't respond at all. Victor's world had narrowed to that pair of people. His father and the woman who years ago had come into his home and stolen his dad, the other woman. He whipped his head around, his gaze sweeping the room like a man possessed, trying to find me, trying to find his mother. And my mother and I stood in the dim circular corridor on the second floor of the banquet hall, watching the spectacular scene unfolding below. Victor's mother, following her son's horrified gaze, saw the man she had hated and feared her whole life, and the woman she had hated her whole life. Extreme resentment and humiliation surged through her dementia like an electric shock. A strange gurgling sound came from her throat, her eyes suddenly bulged, her body convulsed violently, then her head lolled to one side and she slid straight out of the wheelchair, crashing to the floor with a heavy thud, unconscious. Mom! Victor let out a heart-rending roar. He no longer cared about the bride on the stage or the assembled guests. Like a wounded beast, his eyes rimmed in red as he lunged for the front of the hall. Chaos erupted instantly. Guests cried out and rose to their feet, the MC stood dumbfounded, and Sunny, weighed down by her heavy wedding gown as she tried to restrain the out-of-control Victor, looked bewildered and terrified. Just as the chaos reached its peak, a clear voice came through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm." I stood at the center of the stage, a microphone in my hand. My gaze swept the room with calm and finally fixed on the stiff Victor. "First, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend Mr. Victor's and," I turned slightly and glanced at the trembling Sunny beside me, "this young lady's wedding." The audience instantly fell much quieter, everyone was stunned by the sudden turn and my composure. "You must all be puzzled, it seems today's bride is not the one who was originally planned." My tone was steady, as if stating a fact that had nothing to do with me. "I'd like to take this opportunity to officially explain the situation." Victor had already rushed to his mother's side. Hearing my words, he suddenly looked up, his eyes blazing with fury and disbelief. I met his gaze and spoke each word clearly. Evelyn, was supposed to be the bride today. But Mr. Victor informed me a month before the wedding that his mother suffers from dementia and will only accept his first love, this Miss Sunny here, as her daughter-in-law. In order to fulfill filial duty, he begged me to give up the bride's position in this wedding, letting Miss Sunny take it, to satisfy his mother's wish. Whoa! The audience erupted at once. A roar of incredulous chatter thundered through the hall. Uncle Walter sprang to his feet, his expression beyond merely shocked. I continued, my voice carrying through the microphone with a cold, piercing clarity. Out of respect for filial piety, I agreed. And to make the performance more authentic, after much deliberation I specially invited Victor's father back so he could have a proper, complete wedding. My finger pointed precisely at the stunned couple on the stage. I think there's nothing that can make a dutiful son and a seriously ill mother feel more fulfilled than having both parents alive, is there? The truth unveiled, it tore through every false disguise Victor wore. It laid bare Victor's petty schemes, his twisted filial piety, and all the shameful history of his family, bloodied and exposed in the sunlight. Uncle Walter trembled with anger, stabbing a finger at Victor, unable to utter a single word. Victor's colleagues one by one showed looks of contempt and disgust. The relatives and friends in the audience buzzed with talk, accusations, gasps, and curses filling the air. My parents stormed off without a word. The scene collapsed into chaos. Victor knelt on the cold floor, holding his unconscious mother, bearing the pointing fingers and whispers of every guest as I tore away his last shred of dignity. His mouth hung open like a dying fish, all that came from him were heavy gasps and eyes full of despair, no other sound. I stood in the center of the stage, feeling the weight of every gaze converging on me, and gently replaced the microphone on its stand. The absurd play he had directed was finally over. The next morning, heavy black clouds pressed low as if about to fall at any moment. The doorbell kept ringing intermittently and stubbornly, shattering the quiet of the neighborhood at dawn. I watched Victor through the security monitor. He stood outside the ornate iron gate, hair disheveled, eye sockets hollow, the suit he'd worn yesterday crumpled around him, stained with marks that could have been either wine or tears. His face was calm, numb, as he repeatedly pressed the buzzer on my wall. I opened the intercom, my voice flat and unruffled. Yes? Those two simple words seemed to ignite him. He lunged at the monitor, clutching the camera and howling. Evelyn! Get out here, you hear me? You ruined my mother like that. You ruined my wedding. You ruined my life. You and your parents owe me an explanation. He shook the heavy iron gate at the entrance with all his might, like a trapped beast. Is this how your family raises daughters? So vicious, so cold-blooded? Get your ass out here. At this point he still clung to his ridiculous logic, believing that by marrying into our Lynn family he was doing us a favor, thinking our whole family should be grateful for his sacrifices, and that now it was only me, his ungrateful daughter, who had caused trouble. I was too lazy even to answer his absurd accusations. Just then, his phone rang. Irritated, he fished it out of his pocket, saw Mr. Walter flashing on the screen, his expression shifting slightly. He took a deep breath and, forcing down his anger, answered. Mr. Walter, I. No sooner had he spoken than a torrent of furious abuse came from the other end, so loud that even I standing inside the doorway could faintly make it out. Victor, I'm notifying you on behalf of the company. Effective immediately, you're fired. Get out, right now. Mr. Walter. Please let me explain. Explain my ass. Mind your own business. The phone was slammed down. Victor held up his phone, frozen where he stood, the color draining from his face at a speed visible to the naked eye until only a deathly pallor remained. The business and connections he had painstakingly built over many years turned to ash in a single day. Before he could recover from this blow, another call came in. It was from the wedding company. Mr. Victor. When will you finally pay the remaining balance? And the hotel bill, you only paid the deposit before. If you don't settle it soon, we'll have no choice but to take legal action. It was only after I had finally gotten off the wedding planner's call that Sunny rang again, her voice cold, the resentment in it barely concealed. Victor, where's the money you promised me? Do you think you can toy with me? Now the whole city knows I'm a joke. Where's the money? If I don't get it, I won't let you off. Debt collection calls came one after another, like curses demanding a life. He stared at his phone in a daze, as if it were a bomb about to explode. A few days later, I heard that Victor's mother, shocked beyond endurance, had worsened and been taken straight from their rented room to the hospital. The upscale nursing home they had planned to move into was, of course, out of the question now, since Victor couldn't even scrape together the hospital deposit. When Sunny couldn't get the compensation she wanted, she quickly emptied Victor's house of everything valuable and vanished without a trace. Before leaving she even posted one last update, "Really fed the dog, good thing I cut my losses in time." Victor himself, burdened with crushing debt, kept busy looking for work and caring for his mother, who had lost control of her bladder and bowels. The filial piety he had once been most proud of had become the final straw that crushed him and his mother. Victor's biological father found me using the contact information he'd had for me. "Hey, Evelyn, do you have Victor's address?" As soon as he said that, could I not understand what he meant? When I fell silent, the man opposite hurried to add, "We don't mean to rely on you or anything, we just want to find our son. I'm old, I should be able to enjoy some comfort." I smiled, had someone look up the address, and sent the two of them off to their destination. James, with a cheap cigarette dangling from his mouth, pushed open the door to the basement Victor had newly rented. "Son, I hear you're not doing so well these days?" He blew smoke rings, his tone sickeningly familiar. "But no matter what, you're my son, and legally you have an obligation to support me. Your aunt and I are old, we have no income, so this maintenance money, you have to give it." Victor trembled with anger, pointing at the door, "Get out. You get out of here. When you kicked me out back then, did you ever think I was your son?" The woman at his side immediately piped up in a shrill voice, "Oh, you can't say it like that. Blood is thicker than water. We've checked, didn't you used to work at a big company? You must have some savings. If you don't pay, we'll sue you." With that, the two of them carried their luggage down into the dark, damp basement and flopped onto the room's only bed. Victor's mother writhed and moaned on the bed, and a foul stench slowly spread. Outside the window the traffic still flowed like a river, the sun bright and cheerful, while in his world not a single ray could ever penetrate again. His life stopped having anything to do with me the moment he knelt and begged me to give up the wedding.